Hi everyone, I just saw Athena Zangari's Harvest, and I'll admit something. This is the first film I've reviewed for this channel where on the way back from the cinema I googled one of the reviews because a friend of mine had told me this has had very bad reviews. And the review I read was pretty brutal. And I think the person next to me on the bus heard me shout what the hell at one point. I loved this film. I thought it was a masterpiece. I looked at the negative reviews, and I think what they're missing is they're reviewing it for the storyline. They're looking for a folk horror plot. What Sangari has done is take a very traditional folk horror plot. It's somewhere between Midsommar, The Wicker Man, and I guess, some kind of film about outsiders being killed, like the horses from a couple of years ago. It's one of these films about communities going wrong. So there's a tradition there, but although it's about that, it's using that plot and that structure differently from any other film I've ever seen. It feels a bit like Tarkovsky, someone like that. It feels like it's been influenced by uh, I think she's Greek. I mean, I think it's been influenced by a lot of European filmmaking, Antonioni, Tarkovsky, um, people who not Polanski. Oh God, that's the perils of these one take reviews. It'll come to me. Who Pasolini? That's who I meant. People who think a lot about the composition of the frame, about the angle of the camera, and about the materials that they're making the film from. I mean, what it reminded me of most actually was Pasolini's film about Jesus Christ, because uh, you're not surprised by any of the events. This is almost like a myth. It could be a myth in the case of Christianity. In the case of this film, it's like so embedded in the folk horror genre that it's like you are watching the unfolding of a myth. And what she does is, like all allegories and all myths, they work best when they have their own consistent inward aesthetic, that they're not just illustrating something, but they have a shape and texture of their own. This film is muddy and earthy and filled with landscape, but it uses landscape. I mean, it's so beautiful, but it's beautiful in an uncanny way. And what it is that whenever she films the landscape, again, this is a bit of a folk horror trope, but it is moving. There is always wind moving through it, wind moving through branches, wind moving through grass, lights moving across the darkness. Yeah, in a way, you could say, well, isn't that always the case in this genre? But what I think distinguishes it is that that movement feels as though the land is rebelling against the storyline, that there is something human beings are trying to build here, a settlement, a community, even make a film, actually, and the land and the weather are resisting them. There's a really interesting moment where someone is being attacked and some kind of fluid, blood, water, mud, gets on the camera, and she's just left that in. She hasn't tried to move to. She hasn't reshot it or cleaned it off. And again, yeah, we've seen these devices before, but that feeling that the film is resisting being made, that the human story is a thin overlay on some kind of deeper physical reality, and that is the allegory. The film, the slightly strung together feeling of the film is kind of like the way the community is falling apart in front of us. Everything you build on this earth in the film feels temporary and forced. But yeah, at the same time, there is a good storyline. It's a story about a group of people living in a space next to a loch in Ireland. Sorry, I'm tired today, as you can tell. I'm tired in it very English, obviously, in Scotland. And, you know, that they're making their lives there, but actually, it's quite a weirdly half hearted performance of making a life. They are fulfilling all their usual rituals, like this is a kind of spring period that we're in, and so we're going to have a gleaning queen. It's like a harvest festival, and yeah, okay, fine, so far so Midsommar, but actually, it doesn't feel like they believe in their own mythology. It doesn't feel like anyone in this environment is connected to the myth that they're in. It feels as though instead they're building a scaffolding of belief over a terrifying and indifferent landscape. And it's that feeling, that's what reminded me of Tarkovsky, especially something like Stalker, where the landscape is part of the aesthetic of the film, but it also resists it. I kept thinking about the way that horses, which are a very important part of this film, I remember reading an essay by J.M. Coetzee about The Searchers by John Ford, is it? And it's Marilyn Monroe's last film, and in it there are these horses who get scared in one of the scenes, and Coetzee points out horses never know that they're being filmed. They don't really know they're acting, and you sort of have this feeling of the resistance of the landscape, and the animals, the fact that they are really living things, and the camera is watching them, and that's not something that you would ever get in Midsommar, because Ari Aster wants to be in so much control, whereas that's not the aesthetic of this film. There's a feeling of slippage that probably I don't know if any of it was improvised, but some of it feels like it was. There's a feeling that at any moment characters could change direction and shift their motivation. And you could say, how amateurish, but that's not how it seemed to me. I thought it was, as it goes on and it moves into increasing violence, it began to have the feeling of something like that experiment that Philip Zimbardo wrote that book about, the Stanford experiment, the Stanford prison experiment, where are we really watching the actors spiraling here? Are we really watching people trapped together, starting to turn on each other? So it takes new wave cinema, cinema verite, all these concepts to an extreme. And with all of that weirdly documentary feeling, and with all of that precariousness of the aesthetic of the film, because of its pacing and because of its rich, rich colour palette, and because of its very spare but gleaming script, actually, filled with moments of genuine emotional contact and insight, it does have a mythic shape as well. It's like watching, because part of it is about someone making a map. It's like watching a map come partially to life while you're dreaming. And to me, that had a power quite unlike anything else I've seen in the cinema for years. I loved this film. I love the traditions to which it's a tribute, but I also think that it is in itself a very original and powerful piece of filmmaking.